You know, whenever I play a new game with a kick-ass soundtrack, I notice it immediately. It instantaneously elevates everything to a whole new level. But you know why I notice them so much? Because so many modern games have awful and boring soundtracks. They may very well be incredibly well composed and fitting with the atmosphere, but that makes them only worth listening to in that setting. And when it blends into the game's world seamlessly, isn't that every music creator's worst nightmare? They want to be heard! This week, let's talk about the fall of video game music. Welcome to the Art of Video Games. I'm your host, Saxel. Let's get this show on the road. Okay, so, in ye olden times of game development, video game composers were constrained to an incredibly small number of sounds, all of which sounded oddly mechanical and not really like any instrument of the time. Emulating any kind of orchestral sound was simply impossible, so composers looked elsewhere. They took inspiration from all manner of music genres and aimed for music to stick in the player's head way after putting the game down. This was an amazing time for video game music. A plethora of games of all varieties laid down the groundwork for what would become the most memorable video game music of all time. Games like Super Mario and Final Fantasy still use some of these original themes to this day. Now, of course, much of this is down to fantastic composition, but it's undeniable that with a direction to create memorable tracks, that these music maestros had the chance to showcase their talents the world over. So this convention of how to compose video game soundtracks persisted all the way into the 6th generation of consoles, with the PlayStation 2 and original Xbox. Even with vastly improved musical capabilities and classical compositions being used in full force, we still heard yet more ear-catching tunes in most games of the times. Everything was about grabbing the listener and allowing them to engage with the music separately from the game itself. However, then came the dreaded 7th generation. With technology now able to visualize incredible detail, game makers became obsessed with becoming more like movies. Punchy soundtracks were ruthlessly cut down in an instant. Instead, a more cinematic sound that could complement the overall experience was introduced. And you know, this does make a whole lot of sense, to be fair. I don't know about you, but have you ever watched a cinematic movie scene without sound? Or simply removed the music from a game you're playing? It suddenly feels so, well, dead. But why? You can imagine in real life, should this event be happening to you, that there would certainly be no music to orchestrate the moment, and yet your emotions will be flying off the handle anyway. I think there's just like an intrinsic disconnect from a game or a movie to your personal emotions, and so the music becomes your emotions. I'm not sure why any of us are affected by music in this way, but whether you realize it or not, music has the power over your emotions in incredible ways. And so to integrate game soundtracks into scenes like movies, it seems like the best course of action rather than have them sort of pull you out of it. For a great deal of games, this approach led to good results, but something was lost. The soul was gone, and it seems like almost every game of the time was just using the tried and true classical orchestral sound. This led to an incredibly forgettable time in video game music. However, behind the scenes, new technologies were being formed. Had this era of game music not occurred, we may not see today. Procedural audio. For those of you that have no idea what that means, the concept is pretty simple. During your favourite movie, everything that occurs on screen has a set time, down to an exact frame, and that happens every single time. This means music composers know when a future event is going to hit the screen, and so they can change and preempt musical signals for everything on screen perfectly. Game developers, on the other hand, don't have this luxury. Even when trying to guide the player down a path, you'll never be able to perfectly predict when the event climaxes. And so to remedy this, procedural audio was created. Using procedural audio, composers can dynamically change music as the player plays the game. Perhaps a song may have like multiple layers, and each layer can enter the mix as the player progresses through a tense event. It's even possible to remix or change the tempo of a track on the fly, while the player is soaring through the air or comes crashing to the ground. Even with their newfound powers, many games at the time failed to adequately enthrall the minds of their players. The music still had no soul, and some fancy technical wizardry could never fix that. Older games crafted themed soundtracks that could evoke the style of the game's world. The spooky techno soundtrack of Ratchet & Clank was gone, and the screaming heavy metal of Devil May Cry deemed no longer appropriate for this new slew of video games. But they were missing the point. Ratchet & Clank is about an anthropomorphic furry animal flying around space with giant guns blasting aliens to save the galaxy. Its quirky soundtrack was an extension of the game's identity. No matter how much developers may want us to forget all about the music and be entirely emotionally invested in the scene of the game, I think that's just not how games work. Players are far more invested in the kinetic energy of playing the game. A game compared to a movie is an entirely different beast, and unknowingly, older games capitalized on this. Players who thought about the music while playing heard every beat and performed a dance of death to smite their foes. Armed with their new procedural audio techniques, the return of the old ways was nigh. Payday 2, in my opinion, is one of the greatest examples of just how incredible a game's soundtrack can be when done correctly. Payday 2 takes a group of 4 players and tasks them with performing multi-stage heists in a variety of settings. What fascinates me about Payday is how it takes inspiration not from the act of a bank heist in real life, but rather how a movie portrays them. Movies like Heat and The Bank Job formed the basis of how the game would be designed. To partner with events on screen, a drum and bass / dubstep soundtrack was composed, with the intention of adding high intensity to a crew desperately trying to airlift millions of stolen cash from the roof of a bank in broad daylight. But Payday doesn't just partner its soundtrack with the theme of the game, it does something that I've personally never witnessed a game ever do since. It gives its music priority over the gameplay. You see, in most Payday missions, the outcome of a heist is entirely in the player's hands. If they wish to try and infiltrate a gallery of priceless art without a sound or a trace, they may do so. Payday's music evolves with the players as they play. If a player is seen, the heavy beats of the music kicks in and slowly begins to climb as the police scramble to respond. The game has an entire build-up portion that is subservient to the music. The game will wait until the music has built up and is ready for the main theme to begin. And on this exact beat of a bass drop, police will begin the assault on the players. When playing the game, you will feel this moment every single time. It's a truly enthralling moment when everything seems to be perfectly lined up. As the heist progresses, the music enters lulls and then returns to its full force back and forth. And throughout all of this, the game's systems will reflect the state of the music. One heist in particular even tasks players with lining up explosions with song beats during a heist that takes place in a music show. Games like Payday showcase how games can do music to incredible effect. Games on modern hardware are certainly taking more musical risks, like Payday, and I for one am glad to see a return to form. Game developers have once again found the strengths and weaknesses of the medium, and as someone who loves to hear thumping beats coming out at full volume while gaming, I really can't wait. Hey, so I hope you enjoyed the episode on game audio. It was a bit of a monster. I really enjoyed it though. I've been playing a bit of Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance recently, and the music in that game just gets me right in the feels. You're playing through and it's, oh man, it's really quite something. So yeah, follow me on Twitter at VikingGoblin, and follow the blog as well. It's www.theartofvideogames.blog. And you should be able to see stuff before it comes out on YouTube. So check me out on there, and tune in next week for the next episode, which I'm sure I'll think of a topic, but if you do have any suggestions, throw them in the comments down below, and I may well get to them. Anyway, I've been Saxel, and this has been The Art of Video Games.